welcome to join us on the second time. We'll sing it twice through. You're welcome to join us on the second time. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends. Then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends. Then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Thank you all. Good morning again, friends. Welcome to Sunday Service. Welcome to those joining online. I'm reading from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita. These are written by Swami Kriya-yoga, based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. This week's topic, the mystery of Avatara, or divine incarnation. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter states, as we saw last week, O Bharata, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate on earth. Taking visible form, I come to destroy evil and re-establish virtue. What is the mystery of this divine manifestation? Great avatars such as Krishna and Jesus Christ are born as babies, even as we all are. They take human form and go through normal human experiences as they grow from childhood to adulthood. They eat, they play. They may seem to suffer sickness and disappointment like the rest of us. In what way are they different from other human beings? The important thing to understand is that even as they are like us, so are we also like them. Their realization can be ours too. They come to earth to show us our own divine potential. The difference lies not in the manner of their manifestation on earth, but in the consciousness with which they are born. All things are condensations, so to speak, of the cosmic vibration, Om, described by St. John's Gospel as the Word. Most human beings, however, are unconscious of their divine origin. The avatars, on the other hand, come consciously as manifestations of that divine reality. As the Gospel says in the 1st chapter, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning. I want to start with a story that Swami used to tell, and it goes like this. There are 3 friends walking in the forest near where they lived, but they came across a gigantic wall that none of them had ever seen before. This is a really high wall, went on and on forever. And they were very curious. Where did this wall come from? I don't remember this, ever seeing this. I've grown up in this land and I've never seen this wall. So the 3 friends decided, okay, if you stand on my shoulders and then we lift the 3rd guy up and he can make it to the top of the wall. So they struggled and they got the 3rd person up, sitting on the wall, the top of the wall. And they said, so what's there? What's there? We gotta know what's there. And the guy didn't even pay attention to them. He just made this sound of joy and amazement and jumped off the wall and ran, running on the other side. And his 2 friends waited and waited, and he never came back. So they decided, okay. So they rolled a boulder up to the wall, and then they got a tree trunk and they dragged it over on top of the rock, and they climbed up and they struggled, and finally they got one of the guys up on the top of the wall. And the guy down below is saying, what's there? What's there? Friend didn't even pay attention to him. He just went, oh, beautiful. And he jumped down and ran away. So one guy is left, and he's thinking, I've got to see what is over there. And so he rigged up another tree trunk on top of all this other stuff, and he painstakingly climbed up, and he got himself up to the top of the wall, and it was like paradise. He had never seen a garden so beautiful. Fruit trees hanging laden with fruit. It was just the most beautiful scene he had ever seen in his life. And he got ready to jump down into it, but then he thought, oh, what about my friends and my family and all the people of the village? They don't know about this. If we just disappear, they'll never know what could be theirs. So let me wait. Let me not jump down into paradise. Let me just go back and tell my friends. And that is the Avatar. The Avatar has struggled, just as we all struggle. The Avatar has finally achieved God consciousness. And he could jump down and just enjoy it. Swami used to say, most people do that. It's very, very rare that after all the suffering and all the stuff that goes on, all the commotion of these many lives, the soul is ready. We're done, we're going into paradise. Good luck, everybody. But the Avatar has infinite patience. And I wanted to read, not all of, but part of God's Boatman. This is a poem that Yogananda wrote. God's Boatman. I want to ply my boat many times across the gulf after death and return to earth's shores from my home in heaven. I want to load my boat with those waiting, thirsty ones who are left behind, and carry them by the opal pool of iridescent joy, where my Father distributes his all-desire-quenching liquid peace. Oh, I will come again and again, crossing 1,000,000 crags of suffering. With bleeding feet I will come, if need be 1,000,000,000,000 times, as long as I know one stray brother is left behind. So that is the kind of love that your guru has for you. That's why he's come back. for all of us. When virtue declines and vice predominates, we can look at the history of the world, and I think it's really good to study history. I used to hate it when I was a student. It was the most boring thing ever. But now I see how much it has to teach us. And I've been looking into mass deportations of the past, and I realized that, well, the Spanish held California and most of the West for centuries. And then it went to Mexico, and Mexico had all of California, lots of Nevada and other parts of the states. In the Mexican-American War, America won, literally conquered California, and Mexico ceded California to the United States in 1848. Then there was the gold rush of California, 1849, and it got populated very quickly by people seeking gold and became a state in 1850. There's still a lot of Spanish people here. They've been there for centuries, generations. But then in the 30s, after the Roaring 20s and then the Depression of the 30s, 1931 came the Mexican Repatriation Act, and they took hundreds of thousands of Mexicans, people of Spanish descent, and took them back to Mexico. Mass deportation. It was a little better because many people self-deported. Mexico was offering free land if you came back to Mexico. So it wasn't quite as crazy. But then and I should say this, I thought this was really interesting, that people were blaming that population on the Depression. They thought it was their fault. They were the scapegoat. Well, a few years later, they realized that was nonsense, and they invited them all back. But by that time, it was too late. They had made other lives. So that was the 30s. Then in the 40s, 1942, after the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, they gathered up hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans and shipped them into camps in the desert. America has good karma, but it also has some very bad things. So anyway, these Japanese Americans were mostly U.S. citizens. Some of them were third-generation Americans living here. They had, in the Central Valley, they had orchards. They had all kinds of farms, just beautiful. They'd been here for generations, as I said. So this is a true story. You know, you can't believe everything from the internet. In fact, I saw a picture of George Washington with a quote from George Washington under it, and the quote read, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." But I verified this story. This was a real person. So 1942, and the Japanese were being put on trains. They had a few days to sell their belongings or abandon everything, and they were put in camps. So this man, Bob Fletcher, I love that name, such an American name, Bob Fletcher. He was 30 years old, he was a college graduate, and he had a job working he had studied out agriculture. He had a job as an agricultural inspector. And his neighbors, there were 3 Japanese American neighbors who had beautiful orchards, fruit orchards. And when he heard that they were just having to abandon all of this, he went to them before they got on the train, and he said to them, "I promise you, I will take care of your farm. Your trees will live, your property will be safe." And they said, "Bob, you can't do this, it's too much work. It's 3 farms worth of work. It's a nice offer, but it's impossible." Bob didn't want confirmation from them. He had made a vow. And so for 3 years, until the war ended in 45, he quit his job as an inspector. He worked before dawn until after dark every night for 3 years with his own hands. Every year he pruned every tree, thousands of trees by hand. In the blistering heat, he would get the irrigation system out there and make sure the trees, every tree, had water. When the fruit came, he harvested it all himself. He eventually got a wife, Teresa, and she helped him. But still, it's only 4 hands for 3 whole farms. And he would harvest all the fruit, truck it to places where he could sell it. And then, this is the most amazing part, because most managers of big farms in those days would just keep all the money, let everything fall to bits. They didn't really care. And in fact, Bob's friends would cross the street rather than talk to him. He had somebody shoot a bullet into his barn door as a warning. His tires were slashed repeatedly. He got anonymous notes saying, "If you don't let these farms rot, you'll be sorry for the consequences." He got threatening letters. Firm in the truth, never wavered. His friends in the camps heard about this, what he was doing, and through their lawyers, they said to Bob, "Hey, sleep in our houses, sleep in our beds, live comfortably while you're doing this." He wouldn't do it. There was an old migrant shack on one of the farms, and he and his wife lived there. It was freezing in the winter, an oven in the summer, but he wanted to be in solidarity with his friends. If they were sleeping on cots in the desert, surrounded by armed guards and barbed wire fences, then he could at least sleep in their shed instead of their houses. So he sold all the fruit. He deposited the money in 3 different bank accounts, kept it all straight, kept meticulous records. Nobody else did that. They were just, like vultures, sort of circling, "Oh, these people are going to lose their farms, going to be cheap land that I can buy up." But Bob kept records. He paid the mortgages. A lot of people lost their farms because they were in prison. They couldn't pay the taxes. They couldn't pay the mortgages. He paid the mortgage. He paid the taxes. He took the profit and he split the profit. He took a salary and he put the rest in the bank. So the end of the war comes. People are just devastated when they get home. They've either lost everything or it's in ruins, it's been vandalized. And these 3 families didn't know what to expect either. They got off the train in Florin, California, that's where this happened, and their trees were blooming. The machinery was oiled, the houses were maintained, Everything was clean, just like they left it. They couldn't believe it. And, people heard about this story of Bob Fletcher and what he'd done. You can look him up. He lived to be 101 years old. You'd think all those 3 years of incredibly brutal labor just made him stronger. He lived to 101. And people came to him, journalists tried to, what is your story? Why did you do this? He avoided all of them. He wouldn't talk about it. Finally, in later decades, when asked, why did you do this? He finally said 5 words. It was the right thing. So, and just to close this story, one of the patriarchs of one of the farm families was interviewed, and he said Bob Fletcher was the greatest man I ever knew. He not only saved my farm, but he restored my faith in humanity. So sometimes I wonder, sometimes I pray, Lord, why are we here? What is all this commotion? What is the point of all of this struggle? Why do children go to school? They go to learn, to grow, to mature, to grow up. And that's why we're here too. I'm sure we've been like those vultures, swarming in when there's a little bit of commotion to get what's ours. And I'm sure we've also been the Bob Fletchers of the universe, sacrificing, being steadfast, being totally in righteousness, totally an instrument of God. And we need to do that. That's what we're growing into. Being the kind of people that have integrity, are purified, have a soul that is open and receptive to the will of God. That's why we're here, to grow and change. And Yogananda and his teachings are a gift. Not just from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, when he lived. They are so relevant today. Why? Because human nature, maybe ancient Egypt, maybe Russian, maybe whatever, but human nature is always human nature. And the ego needs to be conquered, and not in a way of just suppressing the ego and being brutal with it, although sometimes that does help, but to offer that ego, just like Bhishma in the Bhagavad Gita, who represents the ego. He had a boon where he could not be killed unless he chose to die. And the ego is like that. We want to purify it and offer it to God. It's a friend for a while. It helps us for a while. But then it's time to expand. It's time to go over the wall and into that paradise of God consciousness. And that's our destiny that will be fulfilled. Every desire needs to be fulfilled. It will be, inevitably. So long for that state, and it will come to you.
That story of the 3 friends and the one that turns back to tell the villagers, it captures a little bit of the drama, but there's the vastness of human experience. I mean, what's missed in the story is Yes, he goes back to tell the villagers, but it's not like just a little 1 mile hike in 10 minutes to get back to that wall. I mean, part of the story is that the wall is a little mysterious. It's a little bit removed. It's a little bit unknown. And that's the part that is our job, is to explore that and to grow into that. I suppose many of you have seen out and about, there seem to be a number of people or groups, I don't even know where it comes from exactly, but you'll see people on the bridges walking around with a sign that says John 3:16, or, it'll be written on little parts of the curb, at an intersection or whatever. And if you look that up, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, tum-ty-tum-ty-tum. Well, yes, quite. You learned in school. Well, it didn't stop there. That's the interesting thing. This only begotten business gets us all kind of tangled up, because he has sent that only begotten Son a whole mess of times, because humanity inevitably finds ways to go into the woods sideways off the path. And so we get reminded again and again and again by the appropriate channel for the age. I remember Swami describing Buddha's entrance onto the scene and the correction that he brought. And it's very interesting, because Buddhists won't talk about God, generally speaking, because Buddha didn't speak of God. And part of his correction was that people were stuck on the idea that God would do it for them. And so Buddhism came to say, put out the energy yourself. Don't focus on this other. Do your part in the process. Find the path of moderation, etc. And each master comes, and our own masters have come into an age of energy. And so we find ourselves in this age, and Yogananda brought teachings related to energy. And all of us have a chance to follow in their footsteps. That's the beauty of an avatar. And to recognize, and to me, this is an interesting aspect of it. This little chant that we sang, O thou King of the Infinite, I behold thee in Samadhi. It's not I beheld thee in Samadhi, or some fine day, lifetimes from now, I might behold thee in Samadhi. It's I behold thee in Samadhi, like now, right now. And it's always in the present tense at the end of the purification ceremony, by the very last thing that's said, by the grace of our masters, you are free. Not someday, if you really get it together, you might be free. No, you are free right now, here and now. Now, if we think or imagine the state of freedom, what would it look like? What would the view from that wall look like? You're at the top of the wall, you're looking into this incredible garden. I remember Swami adding a little piece to it, that everyone who saw the garden thought, oh, I could live there forever. And, the two of the three jump down and they go off and live forever. And the other guys are like, hey, excuse me, what happened? Well, that's what happens in Samadhi. I behold thee in Samadhi. And then it's like, I don't know how to describe this. And that's why Yogananda wrote for us the poem Samadhi, put it in Autobiography of a Yogi, wrote it on the New York subway of all places. It's kind of astonishing to think. But he wanted to give people a glimpse of what's on the other side of the wall. What's the part that no one can articulate? He made an effort to articulate it for us. And it's just an incredible gift. And that gift keeps coming again and again into our lives. And it comes in unexpected ways. And I'd like to tell a little story that for me was very touching. I grew up reading a lot. My twin sister started reading earlier than I did. I didn't catch the bug for several years, but anyway, once I caught it, I really did catch it. And I read Lord of the Rings, and I read, The Hobbit and the Narnia series. I mean, I really dove into reading. And when we got to high school, we read incredible classics, Dickens and all sorts of amazing books. In fact, I even remember reading a book from India that, very, very intriguing. I mean, I remember reading Siddhartha, which, was interesting and kind of expansive. But anyway, I remember reading Kafka, and I can't say that I had a very inspiring experience reading Kafka. I felt like Kafka was kind of inflicted on us rather than to be relished and enjoyed. However, this is a story about Kafka himself. And he was walking in a park in Berlin. His life was a challenging one. He struggled with a lot of different things. He was a foreigner for much of his life, and language was somewhat of a challenge. But there was a little girl in the park who had lost her doll. And he saw her, and she was crying and very upset. And he said, well, let's look for it together. And so they did. They tried. Well, they never did find it. And he said, well, come back tomorrow and we'll try one more time. And so they came back tomorrow, the next day, and they met and they looked. Well, again, they didn't find it. But this time, he said, but I got a letter from your doll. And it said, I'm on a trip, I'm traveling, and I will write you. And so periodically they would meet, and he would have letters from the doll and would share them. She's in Paris, she's in Vienna, she's here, she's there, all over the place. And eventually it was time for her to come back. And so he had gotten a doll, gave her the doll, and she said, but this isn't my doll. And he said, showed her the letter. The letter said, my travels have changed me. And he gave her the doll, which then she could sort of accept it. She took the doll home, and years later noticed, as the doll was probably disintegrating by that point, that a little note fell out from inside the doll. And the note said, those we love may be lost to us, but love will return another way. And she realized that, the form, we get attached to the form. It's part of our human heart. Even Yogananda, when he lost Sister Gyanamata, when she left the body, he wept at the funeral. He's the one giving the funeral. He said, I know she's free. I know she's in God. I know she's in infinity. But my human heart misses her. And that's for us too. And so when we read, and we will hear in a few moments in the Festival of Light, a prayer of love went up from earth, and you responded. A ray of your light flashed out from the heart of infinity, burst downward through night skies of consciousness, and was born on earth for the redemption of mankind in human form. Many times has that light descended, drawn to earth by the call of aspiring love. That's us. That's us praying. Somewhere in our hearts saying, Lord, I need something. I need answers. I need light. I need wisdom. I need love, grace. I need to understand. And show me the way. And so, truth comes to us. Love comes to us in another way. And does it satisfy our hearts immediately? Not necessarily, because we're stuck thinking about what we lost, whatever that might have been, whoever that might have been. All of us, in a sense, are missing something. It's like we've lost something precious to us. And it's in the back of our minds always, that thing that's missing. If you've ever lost your keys or your wallet, I finally got one of those little tracking gizmos, which drives me nuts because every time I leave, every time I'm somewhere and I go, 2 doors over, it's like, hey, by the way, you left your thingy behind, it's like, yes, I know, I meant to leave it there. But if you've ever done that, until you find that thing, it just drives you up the wall. You think of all those credit card numbers you're going to have to call to cancel them, and all the stupid whatever, everything. It's like, well, imagine. We've left our souls behind. We've left our heavenly consciousness, our connection to the infinite behind. I mean, they don't have a tracker for that, not in the same kind of way. But it lives inside, always. It's just that we have to learn to look for it. We are free now. When we say that in the purification, it's real, it's true. You are free. By the grace of the Masters, you are free. We are free. Do we know it, is the question. We always have to increase our knowing. That's the job. That's the actual assignment, is increase our knowing, increase our realization. And so we have the techniques, we have the path, we have the satsang, the connection with others that helps us to do that. But know always, the avatars come, and they will come again and again and again, as often as needed, whenever is required, because it's inevitable. We go into the woods. We don't have to beat ourselves up about it. It just happens. But that connection is never lost. That connection, you can think of this as an elastic band on your wallet or your keys or whatever it is that you lose. It's just really, really stretchy. It may be really far away, but sooner or later it's going to find its way back. And that's for us, just as Nirmala was saying. It's our destiny. We will see the other side of that wall. And at that point, we will have the choice. Do you want to jump into the infinite garden and play and enjoy that life? Or do you want to come back and help other people? And it's a free choice. It's not like, there's an arm twisting going on. We will have that choice. That is truly our destiny. And let's dive into the path that leads to that freedom.
Listen, listen, whispering within your soul, hints of laughter, hints of joy, sweet songs of sadness, of quenchless yearning for the light, for my love, your true home. Long your heart has played the dancer, long you've toyed with mere shadows of the treasures left behind you, deep in your soul. Long you've plumbed the dark for answers, long you've begged from beggars' empty hands, gifts of life they too were seeking, gifts none could share. Friend, how long will you wander? Friend, as long as you seek your home. endless yearning for the light, for